Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 19th of August, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we will be joined by live video Skype link by Alex Thomson with eastern approaches from Holland. Well, the weather is gruesome in Plymouth. Let's not mess around. Summer is gone today. It's overcast. It's been pouring with rain. And the mist this morning was pretty impressive along the A38. But I managed to get into the studio, Mike, even though the signs weren't telling me the weather was bad.
Ah, on the road, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the intelligent motorway signs were not telling me today that driving conditions were poor. And I was a bit uncertain as to whether they were poor or not. But there we go. Well, where should we start? Let's start with some good news, and that is that a special commemorative Brexit coin has been issued by the Cook Islands. And here it is. This was provided to us by Dave Barmby, who has done such excellent work on helping to expose the scam of the Brexit referendum. But here we are, Brexit coin, $1 silver proof, June 23rd, 2016, Cook Islands. And if I can read that screen, I think that's $99, is it?
It looks like it.
Yeah. So somebody's got a sense of humour, possibly. But Brexit, key topic. And Alex, you wanted to come in straight away here with Northern Ireland launching a legal challenge. Is this real?
Well, I think the legal action is real, Brian, but as usual, there seems to be more politics involved than real legal argument. It's a Mr. McCord who is bringing the action at Belfast High Court. Quite how Belfast High Court is involved in a decision of Her Majesty's government, I'm not sure. OK, there's parity between the Northern Irish jurisdiction and the jurisdiction of England and Wales. But you'd expect that, if you're bringing actions against the UK government, you would need to bring it in the UK government's, shall we say, domiciled jurisdiction of England and Wales. We know about Belfast High Court, of course, from Anthony Carlin, whom you've covered. It's a High Court whose rulings are not necessarily respected in England and Wales, and much less so in Scotland, but which can be, and they are recommended that they should be if there's not a good reason for it. But it's interesting that, as with this legal firm, Mishcon de Rea, which was hired by business interest, i.e. filthy rich people who don't want their identities blown, to argue that Brexit was unlawful and so on. The same seems to be going on here. So the idea is that in this argument, because the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, a bilateral treaty between us and the Irish government, mentions the presence of the EU, therefore it would be unlawful to leave the EU because of the Good Friday Agreement. So again, a mix-up between treaty law, government obligations, and really the sovereignty of the people.
So, Alex, the question in my mind was, do you think they're going to use this as an excuse to stir things up again in Northern Ireland? Because I was over there a couple of weeks ago, and it's pretty clear that things are as divided, if not more so than ever. More flags flying in various communities of various types than I've seen for quite a long time, and comments coming out of Sinn Féin, or at least one Sinn Féin member today or yesterday, that he would like to see a resurgence of the IRA. So is this being used to just stir up tension in the country, do you think?
Yes, I think it is, Mike. You talked yesterday about how the invented rise in racial tensions and racial incidents across the UK, particularly London and English cities, was being invoked by the very NGOs who are funded by government to find problems, a murderer behind every tree, as it were. And the same is true of Northern Ireland. Sinn Féin, but also the Irish government, which is very heavily implicated in what's happened to the DOCHERTYS, has a strong interest in the United Ireland by supposedly peaceful means, and any kind of stirring will achieve this. I think there's been a real change in mood music in Northern Ireland in the last few years. As with Scotland, the London media has deliberately stopped reporting so that we think of these places as foreign countries and don't keep track of the good guys and the bad guys in the politics. But you can see that in the last 5 years, Protestant Northern Ireland, Unionist Northern Ireland, seems to have gone to sleep and has been induced to think of anything patriotic as just caveman Neanderthal stuff. So there's real dangers to the Union, and Theresa May, of course, has jumped on that by asking the Northern Irish people basically to decide on their own behalf whether the EU external border should be in the North Minch between Northern Ireland and Scotland. So things are not looking good on that front.
Indeed. Well, what about Erasmus then?
Yes, the Irish Times, I've of course been looking at Irish news more with the Doherty case in mind, and you find some interesting things. The Irish Times is left-leaning and kind of sceptical about the government and quite liberal, but it's reporting here quite interestingly that with us leaving the EU, allegedly, this could be the death knell for the Erasmus scheme. Now, this is a scheme set up which hardly anyone's heard of in Britain, but which continental students love because it allows them to study. Any EU member state can participate, even some that aren't EU member states like Switzerland can pay to benefit. It involves you basically applying to an out-of-home country EU member states university as if it was just a UCAS application. And you then, and this is by design by the Eurocrats, you then fall in love with someone you meet in that university and have a mixed nationality child, anchor babies basically. And on the continent, you often meet these guys and they say proudly, "We have had one of the Erasmus babies. We are forging the new Europe." And there are people that are popular YouTubers like Jade Joddle, who has gone into detail on this. That people end up writing these narky comments under her pieces saying, "I am a proud Erasmus student. I am a post-national being. My country is Europe, and if you don't like it, stuff it." So Erasmus is all about that. And with us leaving, there's a very lopsided supply to demand now because Ireland will be the only English-speaking country left for all these Germans, Italians, French, Romanians to come to learn basically international thinking through the English language.
There we have it. Actually, we could have a whole program, I think, Alex, on Erasmus, because of course it is a highly politicized program designed as something good for students. But what's really behind it is, of course, getting the European model into every country. But you mentioned Germany, so we better bring on the leader, Angela Merkel. There's a cartoon circling at the moment, which is essentially Mrs. Merkel feeling a bit upset because the stars have been dropping off the EU flag. So we've only got one left, apparently. But she's also been highly critical of the Britisher Theresa May, who should have been helping her build the greater Europe by lying over Brexit, which I'm quite sure she is doing. But apparently she's too interested in damn clothes and covering up the children's issue. But she did ask Herr Flick where the panzers were today. And I believe that the panzers have been moving towards the Russian border. And I say that quite seriously. We'll come on to war a bit later in the programme.
Yes, but Alex, Guido Fawkes here telling us that Theresa May is imposing her authority in Whitehall. Is she becoming a dictator?
Well, I mean, if we compare this with the last Prime Minister who did this, which was Tony Blair, then the indications are she may be. We didn't realise Tony Blair was a megalomaniac dictator until he was almost out of office. And I hope the same slow learning curve doesn't replicate itself with Mrs. May. What Guido's reporting here is that Number 10 has been putting it about. Don't make any major decisions, run everything by Number 10. So we're going to have this apparat, Soviet style, inside the leader's office, so the ministers are just there for show.
This is potentially an interesting slight nuance on what was happening under Cameron, where Oliver Letwin, it seemed, had to give the okay to every decision.
Well, I think it's still the same system, Mike. All we've got a glimpse of here is the apparatchiks, as Alex has said. So these are the people who are actually going to be the soldiers monitoring policy, but you've got the men in the back who are the ones, the few people who are pulling the real levers of power. Yeah. I think I'm also correct in saying that it's been pointed out the last couple of days that Angela Merkel has appointed a lady originally from the East German political system in order to be her policy protector. I don't know whether you've picked up on that one, Alex. Sorry to digress slightly.
That hasn't reached me yet, Brian, but it wouldn't surprise me because what you often find if you do Kremlinology in the looser sense, the study of Eastern European type regimes, is that a clique establishes itself of people who either went to school together or came from the same region and did dirty politics. The US has it now as well with the Chicago people, the Chicago crowd, Rahm Emanuel and Saul Alinsky's crowd placing their people like Obama in power. And we tend to think of it as a curse of small Eastern European nations. But here we have a clique of East Germans who did very well for themselves in the DDR. president, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, who's now being shouted at by ordinary East Germans or people from Eastern Germany. But he's from East Germany. So is Merkel. Rather a lot of links to the Lutheran Church, which is rather worrying. But I have it on good authority from serious Germans, like judges in Germany, that there's nobody like the Lutheran Church in Germany to persecute anyone moral and upright. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if we had a group of ex-DDR, I wouldn't say ex-Stasi, but DDR mindset people all around the leader.
Right.
Okay, well, getting back to Theresa May then, she has published her vision for Yorkshire in the Yorkshire Post. This is written by her. And she says, for too long, the United Kingdom has been much too dependent on growth in London. The government I lead will instead build a country that works for every one of us in every part of the UK, not just the privileged few. She lied. Firstly, we will make massive improvements in transport. So she's saying we're going to invest in infrastructure, which might seem pretty good. And then she says, though, that to help us realise the benefits, the government will now develop a proper industrial strategy. I'll believe that when I see it. And she went on to say this, but crucially, we will underline all this by devolving real power to the people in Yorkshire. We've started with a major devolution deal for Sheffield City region, and their new mayor will be elected next May, giving people a powerful new voice. Now, again, we're going to keep bashing this, the changing relationship between the individual and the state. So I want to remind everybody about the Global Parliament of Mayors, because this move to put so-called elected mayors, and I say that they are so-called elected mayors in position heading up these city-states as they're effectively becoming. This is building a global governance infrastructure, the likes of which we haven't seen before. Now, the inaugural meeting of the Global Parliament of Mayors is in about 3 weeks' time. So read that article. But then we've got some good news, because today is World Humanitarian Day, and the Secretary General of the United Nations saying a record 130 million people are dependent on humanitarian assistance to survive. Grouped together, these people in need would comprise the 10th most populous nation on Earth. These figures are truly staggering, yet they tell only a fraction of the story. And so other people saying that this is a day to celebrate aid workers and their incredible work around the globe. Now, of course, there are many people working on humanitarian projects who are doing fantastic work, and they should be celebrated. But our concern is the work that's done under the guise of humanitarianism, and particularly some of the big Soros-backed NGOs. And so, again, we're going to continue with this. We've got a big article coming up in the next week or so on this. And in order to understand, really, we've got to get some background in this. So I want to highlight the One World Governance series on the UK column. We've been writing these articles for quite some time. And I just suggest that people have a look at those if they want to understand what this agenda is that's being played out at the moment. Alex, what are your thoughts on the whole devolution city-state business?
Well, I think it's one of those areas, Mike, where we need to look to the Netherlands as perhaps a test bed that's slightly further ahead. The Dutch are already used to the mayors controlling the police and the firemen and ultimately the courts through the Napoleonic model of the mayor doing just that. He can actually countermand the local police chief, who's basically his subordinate. And in Greater Rotterdam, we have a mayor now, Abu Talib, and much is made of the fact that even before Sadiq Khan, he was the first Muslim mayor of a major Western city, and some people went off on a tangent and said he must be an Islamist. More to the point is that he is Bilderberg and Sadiq Khan is common purpose. So it's very convenient, of course, to choose these divisive figures. Boris Johnson is another non-Muslim example, because people will shout and scream about the fact that he's on their side or the other side of the culture wars, and be blind to the fact that these guys have actually been trained up for positions of leadership. I think we're going to have difficulty implementing this. It's a French idea. And there are parts of the UK, particularly of England, that just will not lend themselves to this devolution model. Okay, the easy pickings, the low-hanging fruit is Greater London, Cornwall, and so on. But as I was discussing with my parents on a recent visit back to Britain, there's never going to be a northern city in England which on its own will counterbalance London. So we've got this, the centre of gravity's out. If you try to do an asymmetric federalisation of the country, you're going to end up with London and Scotland and Cornwall being, regarded with discomfort by other parts of the country. You've got to still have the mass of Middle England. It's not easy to parcel up because people will not accept having a regional mayor. So it's destined for disaster. But you can see what the plan is.
But of course, perhaps that's the intention.
Oh, quite possibly, because there are articles coming out now in US East Coast liberal magazines like Esquire, just blatantly saying the Brits are stupid, old, white, fat people voting against the modern, groovy, progressive world. Now, this is the view of certain people in the US and global elite, even in our own country, perhaps more in our own country than abroad, who think that way about us. And these people reside in the shires of Middle England, and so if they're left in a left-behind, unprivileged mass of Middle England that isn't in any groovy city region, perhaps that's going to be the elite's way of smarming at us.
Alex, if I may just add a bit to that, of course, we've mentioned, or Mike's mentioned Sheffield, home of Bob Kerslake, ultimately the man in charge of the civil service. And of course, going back a few years, a massive fraud and corruption in that city. Olaf was brought in to look at some of the corruption with European funding streams. Mr. Kinnock was in post at that time, and what happened, the most spectacular cover-up. But these big cities now are intimately controlled by common purpose networks. I had a fascinating conversation with a gentleman yesterday who was very, very knowledgeable on how common purpose has taken control of city offices. It's taken control of the city charities and NGOs. And these networks are being used to install the policy. So the basic voter has been totally pushed to one side. And the other thing this person said to me is that they had personally witnessed the effect of common purpose training on a room full of individuals where the comment was the NLP was very, very subtle, but very effective to the extent that by the end of the reframing session, the people in that room were like, quote, robots. So we are seeing this very dangerous NLP agenda being used to reframe individuals who will then just follow the common purpose implementation of policy. And I'm just going to suggest that if people are going to be able to fight this policy properly, then they have got to understand where these common purpose networks are.
Okay, let's move on. Public finances. And David Gauke here, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, well, he was pretty proud, at least in his tweets, he was implying that he was proud of the latest government borrowing figures, and particularly the amount of income in the month of July. So £1 billion surplus in July, and that's going to lead to what they're expecting to be a £11 billion deficit on the year. Now, the surplus is normal for July because they get corporation tax in at that point. But David Gauke was saying, with the public finances in surplus in July, our economy starts from a position of strength to face any economic turbulence following the vote to leave the EU. And of course, in the coverage of this, we're seeing this all being related to Brexit. Now, surplus in July of last year was 1.6 billion, so that's not really a terribly impressive figure, $1 billion. That's what the City of London expected. It was £200 million lower than last year. So there we go, not very good. Let's see what else he had to say. As we keep working to cut the deficit, we're well placed to handle any challenges and seize the opportunity as our economy adjusts. Adjusts to what? Nothing's changed, Brian?
Nothing has changed, no. It's just carry on as if something's changed, but nothing's changed.
Yes. And of course, this week we've been discussing the Soros leaks from DC Leaks. More information on that coming out. This time, Soros paying Al Gore millions to push an aggressive action on global warming in the US. And what this is saying, you give Al Gore's environmental group millions of dollars over 3 years to create a, quote, political space for aggressive US action on global warming. And they're highlighting a particular document published by DC Leaks, which shows that the Open Society Institute wanted to do more to support global warming policies in the US, and that included budgeting $10 million in annual support to Al Gore's group. So the information continues to drip out on what, thousands of documents in this DC leaks leak of Open Society Foundation documents. We'll keep covering it as the information comes out.
Indeed, but I think we can also ask our audience for help on this, because of course if you've got an area that you're particularly interested in and you discover that that area is covered within those Soros emails, any research you do that you'd like to broadcast through the UK column, we'd be delighted to have it, because there is so much information there. And also this is giving us a good glimpse into the powerhouse of George Soros and so-called open democracy, and the use of billions of dollars to fund a whole variety of NGO organisations which are buried in nation states designed to subvert the society in those particular countries.
Yeah, that's the key point, isn't it? Because it's not just abroad, it's also at home. So don't assume that just because they're working in Libya or in Syria or in Egypt that they're not in Britain as well. They absolutely are.
They absolutely are. And what better place to go than the British Armed Forces, because we had this astonishing article which several people sent to me this morning. Star of the article is the First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Philip Jones. And this is what he's got to say, that allowing women to sleep alongside their male counterparts would boost team cohesion and equality. And he's talking about trainees coming in through the Royal Marines. And you say, what is going on here? Is this man a buffoon, or is this a career protection move for his own career, of course? But we'll put a bit more detail on this, hopefully. Work is underway to gain agreement for women to be accommodated in the same rooms as men whilst at Commando Training Centre Royal Marines, allowing them to maintain team cohesion and ensure equality of opportunity. Now, of course, over recent weeks, we've been seeing just some of the, I'm going to say, shocking events that have come out of the armed forces as a result of male-female interactions. We've also got Satanism, of course, happening. We've got some really horrific initiation ceremonies, and this is also mentioned in this particular article. But what is going on here? Is it that the First Sea Lord really thinks this is a good idea? Well, we've got a tip-off before the news today to say, well, have a look at the people close to the First Sea Lord. And this is the lady who was mentioned. Her name is Ellie Ablett. I've got it there in the end. And this is her as a commander, but basically she was in this Telegraph article, Meet the Commander Giving the Royal Navy a Female Touch. And what she was doing was setting up a female network through the Navy and the Armed Forces in order to promote women. Now, this is a feministic agenda. This is exactly the sort of thing that Soros likes to get behind. And if you think that we're getting at women, we're not. This is a very, very devious agenda, which is designed to break up the military. That's the first objective here. But it's also designed to pit men and women against each other in order to break down normal relationships between the two. So what can we tell you about this lady? Well, when we went looking for information, it pops up pretty quickly. Here's Facebook, and this is the Excellence in Diversity Award Scheme, and they are absolutely crowing about Captain Ellie Ablett because she's one of the most senior women serving in the Royal Navy, and she's launched this Naval Service Women's Network. And it's going to help men and women in the Royal Marines, Royal Navy, Royal Fleet Auxiliary, etc. And she's put forward to a very big award. Now, if you think I'm just getting at this lady, well, that's not the case, because it's pretty easy to look at other services and see exactly the same thing happening. So we've got Head of Diversity and Inclusion, Sarah Maskell, and this is obviously the RAF. And look at who's pushing it. Leeds City Council, Mott MacDonald, Thomson Reuters. So this is nothing to do with the MOD. This is to do with big business and a hidden hand. Well, let's see how the lies are spun. This is a quote from this lady. She said in the Telegraph article, currently there are 3,150 women serving in the Navy out of a total of 31,800 odd personnel. They make up approximately 9%. However, two issues have been bothering her over the last few years. The number of women joining up has dropped, and the ones already in are leaving earlier than the men. Now, that is a very dangerous position because that's roughly 10% of manpower taken up with problematic issues. But here's the spin. This is just incredible. She says this, for example, in 1987, before the WRENS, the Women's Royal Naval Service, was integrated, 21% of the total number of people joining up to the Navy were female. Now the inflow of women into the organisation is not even at 10%. But this is a complete lie because originally the women were joining the WRENS. They were not actually joining the Navy. That was a completely different service. And of course, they knew they were not going to sea. So this is statistics being deliberately spun to mislead people. And then here she is. This is from Facebook, I think, chair of the Naval Service Women's Network. If you read this comment, it's a feminist agenda. So we think that that's the agenda behind the First Sea Lord. And let's put this into context. The Type 45 ships don't work. The aircraft carriers are not in service. We haven't got maritime patrol aircraft. We've got insufficient ships, severe shortages in skilled NCOs, manning and equipment problems, and recruiting is a shambles. But the First Sea Lord's priority is sleeping cohesion. And is he a buffoon? Was he blackmailed, or has he been mentally reframed? I think it's the mental reframing. And of course, we've got Common Purpose still active, really pushing that agenda. There's no mention of stamping out of the shocking Royal Marine initiation ceremonies. So this is despicable stuff, but this is not real policy. This is socio-political policy coming through. Soros feminism, do you think, Mike? Could be. Well, just before I ask Alex to comment on this, we took another name from the original Mail article, and it was this gentleman. He's retired Major General Patrick Cordingley, and he said this: hot-blooded men and women want to have sex, so inevitably there will be the odd incident. Don't worry about that, just the odd incident. But when they're going off to do their Tarzan Royal Marine course, the last thing that'll be on their mind will be sex. Well, that wasn't my experience in the services, because we'll be fair to the women, what were the men thinking about? 99.9% of the time, it was sex. So we've got an elderly retired officer, doesn't appear to be of an age to have shared sex in a military position, as it were. Shouldn't he be more concerned at the lowering of Royal Marine standards to achieve the equality targets? This is what's really going on by bringing the girls in, of course. And the overall policy is designed to break down discipline and performance. So where is he working? Well, he's part of the Oxford Research Group. Here he is. And rest assured, it's independent. It's a think tank. And if you have a look at some of the people involved, you're going to find for some reason they're connected with Israel and Middle Eastern policy. And if you bring in some of the sponsors, we can see exactly how independent they are. I think that's the European Union flag at the bottom there, Mike.
Yes, but also the traditional tranche of charitable trusts and foundations there as well.
Well, that's to make it independent, of course.
Of course.
Of course. And if we put the thing in context, here's the Ministry of Defence own figures showing this dramatic fall in manpower for the armed forces. And it is now at an exceptionally dangerous level when you take the figures. But of course, out of those figures, you've now got to look at the number of women. This is not comment on women. This is a comment on the feminist agenda. Alex, just a short response before we move into war.
If people are up on their military classical history, they'll know that the Spartans, when they were heavily outnumbered against their foes, try to spur their troops into even greater action by encouraging them to pair off homosexually, so that if the partner was killed, there was more of a grievance. It was like a mixed sex police buddying arrangement. And if a male cop in the shows, if his female partner's killed, policing partner, then there's more of a motivation. And the Spartans had this to the nth power, of course, because they were sexual lovers. So I think that is the intention here, that there are going to be these little love cliques of mixed sex warriors, to use that dread modern American word for soldiers, sailors, and airmen, and that is where it's going to lead. The Canadians have already had this in the field, and there have been pieces from Afghanistan about infantry women, or I think they call them infantry men actually, in the Canadian and US Army, having to be in a tent and shower, albeit behind a flimsy curtain, in the same tent, and appear, if the curtain falls down, appearing in their underwear or worse. And the infantry men, i.e. the infantry women being interviewed there, said, "Oh, well, my bodies just laugh it off and point and say, hey, look at so-and-so." So you can see where this is going to lead.
Yeah.
Okay, now earlier in the week we were discussing the Stimson Center and their comments about United States nuclear weapons in Turkey. This is tactical nuclear weapons. They were calling for the removal of those tactical nuclear weapons from Europe, including Turkey, and they were asking for it to be done fairly urgently. Well, in the Express today, we've got apparently a shock claim that the US is moving tactical nuclear weapons from Turkey, and they're sending them to Romania. Brian, this is fantastic. They're going to Romania. The Express here is saying around 50 US nuclear weapons stored in southern Turkey, and they are going to be sent to the Devaselu air base in Romania. But apparently it's not going to be easy.
I would have thought so. And I wonder what the security arrangements are. Nice stable area to get your nuclear weapons into.
What do you think about that, Alex?
The thing I'd ask Mark is, can you give me the spelling of that airbase? And I'm going to look it up and see which part of Romania it's in.
It's Deveselu.
I'm thinking it's in the Danube Delta. We're just going to zoom out and have a look, because that makes a difference. Drăgănești. Oh, Craiova. Okay, so it's down in the south near the Bulgarian border. So that would mean, I think, that Romania and Bulgaria would be in for a flattening by Russian missiles. If it were just Danube Delta, I think the Russians would send in their marine infantry, which is one of the best, along with the US, British, and Dutch Marines, and do it that way. But there's no way they're going to be able to take it out there, except if they just turn Romania and Bulgaria into toast. I think the extra provocation here, as I'm looking at it, is not very far from the Serbian border, and Serbia, of course, is Russia's ally and brother in the region, ethnic brother. So it's a way of taunting the Russians. No, if you destroy us, you'll destroy your foothold in Europe as well. It is not good. Should we put it that way? Incirlik is, of course, the US air base, not nuclear weapons base, but that has found itself in the aftermath of the coup, surrounded by these trucks of the faction of Turkish Islamism that was against the Americans, turned against them, and was intimidating them. So I think the Americans realized the game is up for the use of Turkey for anything strategic. But as with the Russians basing their air force and air defenses now, and their long-range bombers, even the backfires in Syria and Iran, the issue is, that the further you are from any cover and from allies, the more dangerous it is to operate. So I think the US has realized that Turkey is too far out of range now, because the entire Middle East has realized what the US is up to, and even the secularists and non-Muslims in the region are realizing that it's not good news to have the Americans near. So the American world is shrinking, basically. I'm talking about the military and intelligence complex now. They can't rely on the Middle East anymore.
Yeah. Okay, and you wanted to highlight this article from Bloomberg here. Orders for US forces in Syria don't get shot. Surely that's fairly obvious.
Yes, I tweeted about this because I think it's very cynical. We had times when we were in the equivalent position to the Americans in the world, in the late Victorian era, when we would train sepoys or some other flunkies and what the Romans would call auxiliaries to do all our donkey work for us, because domestic casualties are unacceptable. This is even more cynical, because these are US special forces, so their deaths wouldn't even become public knowledge with the names associated and the units. So we seem to be creating, as all the way up to Estonia as well, you'd think that the Estonians had more sense, basically a ring of auxiliary nations who are expendable to cannon fodder to throw at the Russians.
Yeah. And you wanted to also highlight the USCE's design challenge, the Challenge Extremism competition.
Yes, this is quite laughable. Even one of the best international organizations, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which started with the Helsinki Accords, it's finding that it has no role now because there's no ideological opposition in the world, at least not the way it was in the 70s. So they've invited these people, in this case an Armenian who speaks this international awful alleged English. And here is this Peace Legion. Okay, never mind the awful English. The point is that he got second prize in this competition to be a young person designing a peaceful future for Europe. And what has he got here? He's got three propagandists who are going to bring about this era of world peace. He calls them pigeons, but of course he means doves of peace. And the one on the left is particularly interesting. This is the character teacher preacher. There's not even two people, it's one. So in the international organization view of the world, there are these people who have this amorphous identity of teacher preacher, anyone who has any ideological influence over others, and their job is to be co-opted, together with the media there, the bird holding the camera on the right, and in the center is some kind of dove of peace, you see. So anyone in any public function is going to be co-opted.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Shall we move on to the Dohertys?
Let's do that. Here is the transcript. It has finally come out. It's a huge team effort. It's taken weeks. I'm going to give you at least a link, which I know from the chat box is working. It's not ideal, but it will work. If you want to read it straight away, it's www.ukcolumn.org/document, T on the end, no S, so /document/Docherty-transcript, and that's DOCHERTY-transcript. But we'll also be putting a more prominent link.
Sorry, there should be a .pdf on the end of that.
Well, that's right. That's the upload page, which is short to read out. And if
right.
you go to that bottom of that page, you will read the PDF. The longer link is also working, the one straight to the PDF. Now, here's what the PDF the printout of the PDF looks like. If we can have me back on screen, please, Theo. Thank you. There we are. It's taken volunteers in several jurisdictions. It is this thick.
This is an amazing amount of work, and we'd like to thank all the people that have given their time and expertise to do this.
So it takes a weekend to read, which is why we're uploading it on a Friday. We now have a member of the Scottish Parliament who would not like publicity at this stage, looking at it seriously on behalf of the Dohertys, which is a first. And I'm going to spend a couple of minutes doing a couple of things, if I may. Now, this is going to be a mouthful, but it's intended to be. For those who are overwhelmed by what the Doherty stuff is all about, I'm going to read you the table of contents. It's going to take a couple of minutes. So this is a chronology of what has been done to the Dohertys. The suspected paedophile makes his demand in August 2014. The threats begin. Viscount Petersham threatens to have the children taken. Viscount Petersham attempts to evict the Dohertys. The Dohertys first attempt to report the suspected paedophile. The UK National Crime Agency refuses to take a report. There is an emergency meeting of the Viscount's high-status associates. A local police sergeant tells the Dohertys not to report the threat. The local sergeant colludes with the alleged paedophile and protector. The suspected paedophile, Alan Lowe, immediately digs up the Crim and Mogate estate at night, and on that I will say that we have a police source since who, as David said last week, has told us that the bodies of children were dumped at sea after being dug up from there. Attacks continue on the Dohertys' house and garden. The Aberdeenshire authorities take an interest in the Dohertys' children. Police Scotland instruct Aberdeenshire Social Services to investigate the Dohertys. Social work managers lie about not having received the Dohertys' paperwork. Social Services demand to assess the Dohertys. A fast forward to the outcome of the police complaints procedure, and then we return to the 2014 chronology. No lawyer in Scotland would touch the case. The Dohertys flee to Ireland. Tipperary Gardaí Irish police show up. The Garda superintendent had been told Interpol wanted the Dohertys. There was no trace of the claimed Interpol alert. The Dohertys stay in Ireland, moving to County Mayo. A dossier of senior corruption allegations is handed to the subject of the allegations. Cross-border surveillance, November 2014. The Dohertys are bullied by the Garda Armed Response Unit, January 2015. No court documents. Constitution is said not to apply to the Dohertys by the police who come. There is no lawyer offered and no legal rights. Irish social workers continue an international Dohertys task force with Scotland and drive a new UK car in Ireland. A pack of lies arrives from Scotland. This is Phyllis Smart, I believe her name is. The risk of abuse in this report is said to be by the children's grandfather who died 5 years previously. The children are seized for the first time, January 2015. The DOCHERTYS are, by pre-arrangement with social services, referred to a psychiatrist by a local doctor who says, "I'm here to refer you to the psychologist." If you report paedophilia in Ireland, you must be mentally ill. Social workers are spotted pre-cooking the psychiatric assessment. The DOCHERTYS try to find a psychiatrist in Ireland. The children are returned for the time being by an Irish judge in February 2015. After the Irish judge finds for the DOCHERTYS, intimidation increases. A mental health nurse using a bogus name offers free psychiatric assessment, in quotes. An Irish judge strikes out the Scottish claims and Police Scotland complain about the DOCHERTYS. Scottish claims are nevertheless revived in Ireland through the Irish Guardian's report, which copies the Scottish information. Following the children's return to the parents, Police Scotland say they want to arrest the parents. There is a wall of silence from the Scottish authorities. There is frantic correspondence, which is ignored. The Garda Ombudsman finds the DOCHERTYS complaint admissible, but then says he wants to arrest the DOCHERTYS. The Scottish police complaint handling then comes in. Then the DOCHERTYS are targeted by London and Dublin-based hackers. The DOCHERTYS dogs are tortured with tasers. It is unsafe to leave the house to earn their keep. The DOCHERTYS are continually in both fight and flight mode. Publicity begins to be drawn to the case. Irish investigative journalists from the national broadcaster RTE and the Irish Taoiseach Prime Minister's staff are set up to cultivate the DOCHERTYS and pretend to be interested. The DOCHERTYS water is poisoned. The DOCHERTYS are never given the notes used to take the children. Their mail is tampered with. On the 15th of December 2015, they write letters to the political leadership in Ireland, and the day afterwards they are raided. The children are again seized. No warrant is produced by a Donegal Armed Response Unit. There is now no pretence that this is a child protection case. The eldest daughter, being carted off to Garda station, is mocked the whole hour-long journey in the car for being Christian by a social worker or policewoman. There is a first court hearing. I'll skip some of this now because it goes on and on and on and on and on. Then we find that Irish social workers are very closely allied to Scots, and they're copying Scottish information again. One of these, Mary Malley, says in court that Mr. Doherty is the paedophile and he's just projecting onto Viscount Petersham. Then we get on to judicial corruption. Then we have the Irish state's lawyer formulating the judge's ruling in court, and the rulings given in court are: 1, never mention this hearing; 2, you must be evaluated by a psychiatrist of the other party's choosing; and 3, you must stop naming those you are complaining about. That was a family court ruling with no mention of the children at all. Attacks intensified. The raid is timed for Christmas to stop them appealing within the 2-week window, but they do. Then they discover that the other party's lawyers have the monopoly for court transcripts in County Donegal. So the transcripts are being produced by the other side. Then Donegal Social Work relocates for one case only to the mental hospital in Letterkenny, so that if they DOCHERTYS appear, they can be sectioned on the spot without giving their consent, because you've given your consent by being there. Then a priest refers the DOCHERTYS to an ominous counsellor and thug. The counsellor, who tries to kill them when they visit his remote cottage, recommends a particular lawyer. This lawyer then takes their documents, doesn't see them till the day in court, and then lies in court that the DOCHERTYS have consented to their children being taken. At this point, policemen are keeping them out of court. Then the judges subsequently say, right up to the Supreme Court in Ireland, you've already consented to your children being taken, so we're not going to give you an appeal, we're not going to give you a judicial review. And when they go for a writ of habeas corpus, they're told, we're going to have to liaise, well, they're not told, but the judge, for the first time in Irish history, leaves the High Court, liaises with the Supreme, the Irish Chief Justice, and with the corrupt judge from the previous case, and comes back and says, you're not having your habeas corpus. The other side need to present their story, which has never been part of habeas corpus. Investigative journalists try to steal the DOCHERTYS' passwords. Emails to the Information Commissioner are wiped. A drunk Garda policeman sidles up to the DOCHERTYS at Mass and tries to steal documents from Mrs. DOCHERTY's handbag. Their car is sabotaged. The Garda won't turn up. Police Scotland, by mistake, send an email back to the DOCHERTYS with the word FUCK in the subject line. By the way, a Scot later called out in a Scottish accent FUCK when he realised that the DOCHERTYS house had not been successfully set on fire. This is all in Ireland, Scottish agents in Ireland. Then the DOCHERTYS find that their toddler has been injured in care with various injuries, fingernails on the cheek, a black eye. They try to take a picture of this, and then they're told immediately, your mental health is insufficient, we're not going to continue this meeting. Then they're after the camera, of course. The DOCHERTYS feel unsafe in the Republic. They go to Northern Ireland and have, quote, the most surreal 10 days of their life. The police service of Northern Ireland at least is surveilling them, and also seems to be in league with the men who come to their holiday home and block them in and turf their stuff out, trying to steal their documents, which incriminate people around Viscount Petersham. The upshot is they're left without children, home, possessions, or money, and have to go back to Scotland as foot passengers. They escape over a field and a wall from a monastery, where the Roman Catholic Church has got a network that's tipped off people in 3 countries to their presence. They go back to foot passengers to Scotland. Police Scotland realise they've given them the slip because they were foot passengers, and then tip off the Irish Garda, look out for them coming back as foot passengers, but this time they're in a car which has been given by a well-wisher, so they escape that way while the Garda are combing through the foot passengers. That's the point at which habeas corpus dies in Ireland on the 25th of May 2016, and it's Judge Robert Horton who has that note in Irish history. He's removed common law from Ireland. The Dochertys then review their experiences and request specific help from the public, and I'm going to go through that help, which is much shorter, in a moment, but I've been speaking a few minutes, so I'll hand over to Brian and Mike for a moment.
Well, the simplest thing for me to say, Alex, is that the comments coming up in our chat box are what has happened to the rule of law. And of course, what we are now seeing is the irrefutable evidence that the rule of law, certainly in UK, so we're going to say England and Scotland, but it also appears now Southern Ireland has completely broken down. There is no law. And short of having your children taken, what might the law do? Resort to torture or murder? These are very, very dark, sinister times, but the evidence coming to the surface. And probably it's appropriate for me to say this is why the British Constitution Group at the moment has renewed the campaign on the single theme of restoring the proper rule of law, because until we do that, this is not only going to continue, it's going to get worse, because of course the state is going to lie and lie to cover up its criminal activities.
And for those outside Scotland and Ireland, I should say Scottish and Irish society is clannish. It's not for nothing that the word clannish comes from Gaelic. And Scotland and Ireland astonished the world for their good points, for their beauty, both of landscape and of people, and their long history of struggling for sovereignty and the rule of law. But what's inverted it now in Scotland, and I think even people in England and Wales are not aware of this, let alone overseas, is you've got this tripartite clique now of Freemasonry, which is largely Protestant, the Roman Catholic hierarchy, and the political thuggery, the IRA and the Loyalists. It's more the IRA who feature in this story. And these people in public roles, independent commissioners, police reviewers, social service chiefs, often they're married to each other, or they're having affairs with each other, we found in this case. And we often find that they are lying about their nationality or something. So with that in mind, this is what the Dochertys are asking for help on right now. So if you're watching in Ireland or Scotland particularly, we would love to hear from you at dochertyinvestigation@ukcolumn.org. No dot there. DOCHERTYI investigation@ukcolumn.org. Here are their 10 questions. 1. Is Bridgeen Smith, the manager of social services in Letterkenny in Donegal, in fact the wife of regional director John Smith? Because we think they are. 2. Who in the Irish government is trying to tell the Dochertys to place all the blame on the social worker in Mayo, Mary Malee, in order to deflect from the Dublin government? 3. What is the relationship between Sergeant John Falcon and Maria Houston, who uses various name spellings, who is the unqualified woman whom the Dochertys believe have been looking after their son without qualifications and hitting him? 4. What is the background and motivation of the Donegal lawyer Lisa Finnegan? 5. What is the current professional practice status and location of psychiatrist Kieran Smith, who tried to do a stitch-up on the Dochertys? 6. What is the current official location and the current actual practice location of the social worker Gabrielle McDade? It appears she lives in Londonderry, is registered in Londonderry, and works across the international border in Donegal, where she became runner-up for Irish Social Worker of the Year without apparently being registered with Irish Republic practice address. And allied to that was Gabrielle McDade, registered to practice social work in the Republic of Ireland before June 2016, at the time when she was dealing with the Dochertys. 7. What is Judge Paul Kelly's background with the Roman Catholic Church? 8. since the court-appointed guardian, Patricia Maloney, does not drive, and we think she's actually South African by origin, but she's been in Ireland and Britain and doesn't drive, who was it who got the police in Northern Ireland and Scotland to give them an escort, as we think they had, to take the children, against their will actually, to their maternal grandmother's funeral in January 2016 in Perthshire, in Blairgowrie, we believe. This was Grandmother McLaren. Who gave them a police escort? Who authorised it? 9. Who bought Lawton House in County Offaly for James Riley, who was the previous children's minister in Ireland, because he's known to be a bad debtor for nearly €2 million? And which entities and persons previously purchased for Riley a care home, which he then had to sell? We believe that Riley is penniless and being manipulated by Irish, British or other interests. Who bought his houses? And 10, this is most important, can the public notify us of any people connected with anyone you can read about in this transcript who are known or reasonably suspected to be police informants or military and intelligence informants, to have an allegiance to Freemasonry, to any criminal group or political gangsters, or to the Roman Catholic Church, especially if that allegiance is much stronger than they publicly intimate, because people have sidled up to the Dochertys and pretended to be nominal Catholics or ex-Freemasons, and you find out that they're very much ardent Catholics and current Freemasons. And finally, on point 10, can the public tell us about anyone connected with any of these people who is living a lie about their denominational affiliation, their sources of wealth, the amount of their wealth, their political loyalty, or their sexuality, or their nationality?
Alex, just pausing for a couple of seconds there, because of course what you've just read out is incredible, because as a synopsis it's excellent what this family has been through, not as a result of harming or neglecting their children, but simply saying somebody approached in order to buy their son. And of course, we're seeing the total breakdown of law and order and policing in order to, which is permitting the cover-up of what is criminal activity, criminal common purpose. In fact, I'm using common purpose in a lawful sense there. So this is very, very serious stuff. Some people are saying this must get the lid off it. Well, the answer is it won't, unless we, the wider public, demand action from the people who are still sitting on the fence in government, for example. But I'd also like to end on the fact that we have been getting extremely good help from professional people. That includes the police. And Alex, I have to put this in because you won't be aware of this at the moment, but we've also been receiving some very good assistance from people that we know are Freemasons. So I'm going to gently suggest here that the rule should be to judge people by their actions. But I'm able to say with confidence this lunchtime that we know that there is huge disquiet within the Masonic movement as individuals start to realise how deep and how dirty this criminal activity is. So I'm trying to go down a middle path there, because we have received and we expect to receive further help from some of those sources. I'll let you reply if you want to come back on that, but I think it's an important thing to say.
Yes, we warmly welcome help from any quarters. I'm a fairly fundamentalist Protestant, and I'm ex-GCHQ and ex-Orange Order, so you'd expect me to say things about the IRA and Sinn Féin. But we've also got IRA gangsters or ex-gangsters helping the Dochertys and tipping them off who the bad guys are. The Dochertys are committed Catholics, and they hate the dioceses for what they've done in Ireland and Scotland, and especially the hangers-on around the bishops. But they continue to be helped by Christians of all denominations and none. So get in touch. You might think you're betraying your institution, but ask yourself, if you're so loyal to the Freemasonry or Roman Catholicism or whatever it is, that you're not going to help in this situation, then what kind of conscience have you got, and what kind of institution are you in? And remember that you're going to be judged in eternity for what you did as an individual, not as a member of a fraternity. And I'm going to close with the 6 names which didn't make the transcript, but which the Dochertys have asked us very specifically to go on more detail about. So if you're listening in Ireland and Scotland, more on these people, please. In Ireland, Enda Sherlock, Carmel McGilloway, John and Yvonne Hartnett, and John and Neil Doherty, D-O-H, Doherty, not related. And in Scotland, Robert Cassidy and Neil and Karen Mackay in Edinburgh. Those are the people we want to find out more about.
Alex, thank you very much. That was excellent. And it's up to all of us to follow through on this case, because, of course, this case can help so many other cases. And we've got thousands of children who are caught up in this criminal trafficking and abuse network being run by state agencies. Child protection and information sharing, we're just watching the clock a bit here, Alex, but would you like to just have a look at or comment on this one? EMIS Health.
Your suggestion was that this was the named person scheme coming to the rest of the UK?
Well, I'm baffled by who these guys are, EMIS Health. Their About Us page says, put simply, we're the leader in connected healthcare software and services. Sounds like a private company to me, but if you go to that page that I've tweeted out about their child protection information sharing, CPIS, it reads very much like a new obligatory system for the NHS in England. So named person is on its way by hook or by crook. People often forget this in England. They think that named person is a silly plan by the silly Scots. It was planned by people outside Scotland who moved to Scotland long term to bring it about in Scotland as a test bed as soon as Scotland got its own administration. And that is exactly what's being foisted on England now. Don't assume if you read about these plans for NHS or other named persons in England that it's an English plan. It is a global plan and a globalist plan.
So in Scotland, we've had it pushed through via legislation. In England, we seem to be seeing it coming through the back door.
Oh, yes, because the English have been tipped off and they're far more resistant to these things generally than the Scots anyway. So there's going to have to be, I think, local, perhaps regional, perhaps mayoral level databases, and ultimately the NHS will have a linked one. I mean, here in the Netherlands, we have supposedly each council has its own database of people. But of course, it's just a fiction. They call it the council database, but it's linked across the country. People just feel a bit better about telling the council all their details, whereas in fact, anyone in the government anywhere in the country can read it. So that's what we're going to end up with this as well. And the Docherty case, as the Dochertys say, wasn't in the end about child protection. It was about data on the Dochertys. In this case, because paedophiles through the institutions wanted to kill them and to do nasty things to their children. And the same is true of child protection arrangements in a mass sense, you know, the named person or whatever the EMIS Health is going to set up in England. It's not about keeping tabs on the children. It's about sucking in the information from the obligatory angle of looking after the children in order to know exactly what the population is doing and thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Alex, we're going to say thank you very, very much for that excellent work on the Docherty case. Of course, there is no better case at the moment taking the lid off the sheer breakdown in things in the United Kingdom, and now we can see Ireland as well.
Just before we finish, can I just ask how many people helped you with this, Alex?
We had one main transcriber in the Glasgow area, a secondary transcriber who's a British expat, a third pair of eyes who was listening, or ears were listening, and we have had a number of people in the core team who've been researching through various databases as well. So we're basically doing the work of the police and intelligence services for them, but the core team is about half a dozen people, and now we're hoping that we're going to reach even in places where we perhaps don't have many viewers and listeners, like Derry, Donegal, Scottish Central Belt, Aberdeenshire. If they come across a copy of this recording, that they read the transcript, email dochertyinvestigation@ukcolumn.org and become part of the team.
So I would just like to end then by saying that, you know, that is fantastic, and thank you very much to all the UK column members and others that helped Alex with this. We've got other projects of this type that we would love to carry out this work with. So if you're willing to get involved in other projects, any other people within the membership, please get in touch.
Yeah, perhaps we'll just end by saying that, of course, these subjects are extremely dark, and we know that some people, it's quite a jolt when they realise just what is going on. It's very easy to feel that you need to retreat and run away from it. We say don't do that. Action conquers fear, but the thing to do is do what you feel comfortable. If you can just do some gentle research over the internet, you may be the very person that finds the one document or the one photo or the one name that helps to unravel the whole thing. We need a lot of people to do a little. Stay in your comfort zone, but don't run away from this problem, because if we allow it to breed, we will not be able to run and hide from it. And you will find that if you do things, you instantly feel better, and you're going to meet some really good new friends, because, as we've said, across all the institutions, there are still many wonderful people out there. They just don't know where the other person is. So if we can bring them together, that is a really great thing. And we'll just say thank you very much to the person who said no publicity to the fact that they've given us a donation. So thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. No Publicity. And thank you to the other people who've sent us donations over the last few days. How are we able to do what you are seeing unfold on the news today? We're only able to do it by the fact that other people are helping to keep us going. So if you haven't taken a subscription, please do. And if you're prepared to donate, that helps us to really get in amongst some of these cases. That's it, I think. Alex, thank you very much for joining us. Excellent. We will be back on Monday at 1 o'clock. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.